Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 79, The Needles and the Compassion Done, with our guest via Skype, Denise Cicuto. Hey Denise, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hi Gina, thanks for having me back.
We talked more about spirit babies the last time, and we mentioned that you're an acupuncturist, and this time I'd really like to talk to you about how you got into acupuncture, because there's a lot of spiritualness that surrounded that, and specifically around Kuan Yin. So if you could introduce yourself again and remind people about who you are, what you do, and then we'll go into more about how you got into acupuncture.
Okay. I'm Denise Cicuto. I'm a member of Circle of Caradwin with you and everybody else in the coven. I got my third degree last year, and so that makes me one of the teachers in the coven. And for work, I'm an acupuncturist and a Chinese herbalist. In California, those go together in order for licensure. So I do both together. What else? I think that's probably the relevant stuff. You don't really need to know that I'm a Doctor Who fan, but it doesn't hurt, right, to know that. And that in another magical setting, I'm a Gryffindor.
Awesome. Yay, Harry Potter. Anyway, we could geek about that forever too, but so why don't you go ahead and just tell your story about how you ended up getting into acupuncture and going to acupuncture school, because I think that's a really interesting story.
Okay. So I'll try to start with the two most important threads to weave here. So I had a lot of pain. It was endometriosis, which is a painful gynecological condition, and a friend of mine in the Boston area in Watertown, she was going to school in Watertown, suggested I come get acupuncture, and I did, and I started feeling a lot better. And it made a huge difference in my life. So not only did I continue to get acupuncture, I decided to go to acupuncture school. And how I figured out which school to go to kind of started in my Qigong class. I was in Qigong in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time, and I told my teacher that I was planning on going to acupuncture school, and I was looking at schools in California, mostly because in California we have to study Chinese herbs as well as acupuncture for licensure, and I knew that I really wanted to study herbs and not just kind of sort of study it on my own like I had been with Western herbs. I wanted to have it, scheduled and do this and study all these herbs and memorize all this stuff so I would actually learn it. So my Qigong teacher brought me into his office and showed me a whole shelf of books written by the person that the acupuncture school I went to was named after, Yosan Ni. And I went to Yosan University in Los Angeles. And so it was kind of like a very big arrow from the universe going, go to this school. I never looked at any other school because I took that as a good sign. And how Kuan Yin sort of fits into it is while I was at that Qigong studio, not on that day when I was talking to my teacher, but it was the first time I ever had a vision or a visitation by Kuan Yin. I was doing some relaxation, very meditative pose we were doing in Qigong. I don't remember exactly what it was, but then I closed my eyes and I had this vision of Kuan Yin sort of standing on a cloud, and her robes were flowing, and you could see the ribbons that flow off of her dress were, flapping in the light breeze. And I haven't seen many representations of her in rainbow colors, but I do have a memory of her being in either with a rainbow behind her, or there was a rainbow somewhere in that image, in that visitation. And so that's how I started praying to Kuan Yin. And it became more intensified after that. When I decided to go to acupuncture school, I had applied in 2001 and didn't start until 2002. But we all know what happened in 2001, which is September 11th. And whereas I had been magically attuned a little bit before then, I felt like Kuan Yin turned up the volume for me on that day, and all of a sudden I could hear a lot of the psychic energy from people who were either dealing with loss that day or wondering if their family members were okay. You know, that particular day, for a little while, at least the telephone lines were out, telephone lines are down. And so it was hard to get a hold of people because they were overloaded. I forget which, but you know, I had friends who left outgoing messages on their home answering machines saying, "We're okay, we're going to help with the rescue teams," or, you know, whatever they had recorded, because yeah, it was, if you couldn't get a hold of people, it was really very challenging for us who were not in New York City at the time. I was in Boston at the time, and you know, trying to get a hold of my loved ones in New York City was really hard. And I don't know if you had that experience too, but so yeah. So I guess that's kind of how it all started, for me, and it was definitely around that year. And so the next year I started acupuncture school, and you can't see this now, but if you go to my website or people look at my business cards, I have one of the, it was always very kind of like of course, to me, when the graphic designer was designing my logo, what do you want in your logo? And Kuan Yin had to be in there somehow. So it's one of the mudras she does. And sometimes people mistake it for like a hand with a needle in it, which is kind of cute too. It's
yeah, I can see how they did. Can see that. Yeah,
like acupuncture is okay. So get on over to our website so you can see the image, so you know what we're talking about. But yeah, so Kuan Yin influenced the graphic design too, which is kind of funny. And I never thought I would actually be saying that out loud, but and she influences me all the time now. As you know, Gina, I got a very big tattoo of Kuan Yin a couple of years ago, and I had planned on it for a while, and then it turned out that the tattoo artist I chose had lots of books that she owned about Kuan Yin, and the designs and pictures of Kuan Yin in different cultures and different postures. And so basically she said, you know, okay, how do you want her to appear? And I think in a lot of ways she looks like what I saw in that first vision, except for the fact that she's standing on a lotus here.
Yeah.
But I chose that too.
No, it's a gorgeous tattoo, and if anybody is lucky enough to see it in person, it's some seriously great artwork. It really is.
Yeah, I'm blessed that I got to work with Jean to do this tattoo before she stopped actually doing tattooing. And you know, I mean, while tattooing and acupuncture are completely different, they both are related because of the needles, and there isn't as much blood with acupuncture, but of course there is with tattooing. And I think it's a good way to bring a lot of my different sides together. And I'm kind of doing that now with the kind of acupuncture I'm studying as well too. But I guess we'll talk about that soon.
Right. Well, I mean, to kind of go more basic, I mean, how does Kuan Yin come to you? Like, how do you, like, kind of what of her attributes? What does she do? What is her thing?
She is the bodhisattva of compassion, and as such, sometimes people think that she's a very easy goddess to pray to invoke, to to have as part of your, if you pray to many deities like some of us do, that she is a very positive deity, and it's true, she is. But I do want to also say that compassion is not necessarily easy. I do the spirit babies work because Kuan Yin calls me to do it. I do every month, once a month, I volunteer for a clinic that's an alternative medicine clinic that treats low-income women with cancer. And it's some of the hardest 4 hours a month. It's probably the hardest 4 hours a month a lot of times that I do, but I do it because Kuan Yin calls me to do it. She calls me to do this work, and I feel her presence every time while I'm working, while I'm doing acupuncture, but at the end of every appointment with my clients there, I always ask them if they want a hug, and I put all my love and compassion into those hugs to make sure that I send them away with a little bit of that. And they always inspire me. I could be having a bad morning, but then I go to work at this clinic, and it's amazing how women who are struggling with such a horrible condition can actually bring forth inspiration into others' lives. So yeah, compassion is a very important thing. It is a very positive aspect, but it's also a lot of work, I think, in my opinion. And it's
well, I think it's really misunderstood.
Right.
Like, people really, they couple love and compassion together, but they're not necessarily the exact same thing.
Right.
And sometimes compassion is not nice. And people think it has to be, and it's like, no. Sometimes the greater compassion is walking away from somebody, or telling somebody about themselves.
Yeah, and it's hard when you have to make those choices. I can't be around you while you have this toxic person in your life. I can't support you while you're doing this thing that's really crushing you. But I'm gonna be over here leaving the door open for when you need me. And that's really hard to do, but I think it really is a part of compassion.
Yeah.
And kicking toxic people out of your life just because they're toxic people is also a thing to do for your own for self-compassion, right?
And people forget that too. Like, compassion towards others doesn't necessarily mean you have to forget that there's compassion towards yourself. And I know from my studies of Buddhism, that's a big thing, is like, you have to remember yourself as part of everything else in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you don't, that's when burnout can start. You have to take time. It's that oxygen mask rule.
Right.
Take time, take a few seconds to put on your own oxygen mask before you help others. You have to refill your own cup before you can share it with other people. And I do think people forget that sometimes. And I just actually wrote a post on star.org about self-care and activism. With the idea that you can't you may not always be able to do activism unless you take care of yourself, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in times like right now where, after the shooting in Orlando, it's especially if you're doing a lot of the priestly work or first responder type of work, in positions where you're taking care of people and their emotional needs,
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take care of yourself as well, in that you will not, you'll fall over eventually, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think for me, the equivalent of the psychic screams I got in 2001 are actually looking at Facebook this past week,
Right.
and it's, yes, it's a good place for people to get out their feelings and their ideas, but boy, howdy.
Right.
It's okay to step away for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
um, and to regroup and, do something else that's nourishing for your soul.
Absolutely. And that's why I kind of find it hard when, there's a big outcry for activism, and, people are like, your science is being complicit, and your silence is this and your silence is that. And it's like, I think sometimes when people are silent, it doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with anything, or that they're not thinking about it, or they're not feeling anything about it. Sometimes, that silence is, I need to back away from this because I'm triggered, or I need to think about what happened. I need to do something for myself so that I can express myself later.
Right.
And I don't think people should be shamed for taking that time to do that.
No, not at all. I think, and the people who do take the time and, to figure out how they want to express themselves later are the people who come back and say, okay, this is how I feel, and this is why I've been quiet, because I've been trying to figure out a way to say this. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes that's the most thoughtful expressions you can see from people. And I have seen some of those in the past week around the shooting at the Pulse Queer Club in Orlando, and around the Stanford rape case as well.
Right.
But, I also think that the other side to silence is not saying anything at all when you should speak up for people. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can, but it can be little things like if you hear somebody make jokes at the expense of gay people, or jokes at the expense of trans people, call them on it. Mm-hmm. I've been doing that my entire life with my bigoted family.
Right.
Like, that's not okay to call people faggots.
Right.
It's unless you're one of them, you have the right to use that word. Don't use it. And I've been doing that. I've chosen that battle. So I think that there's a difference between being silent to figure out your own feelings, but not speaking up, and as opposed to the silence when you see bigotry in front of you and you need to actually say something. That's a different line.
And I always put the little asterisk saying, if you feel safe doing so, because, for some people, they could be, if they try and speak up, they could be in just as much danger as the queer person involved.
That's true too. Yeah, that's true too. Thank you for pointing that out. I knew we were going to have to talk about the events of the past week at some point, because it's so prevalent on everybody's minds.
Yeah, and it's hard not to. And when you think of, when I think of Kuan Yin and the idea of compassion, especially in Buddhism, part of that is, I think, part of the process of it. You're going through the stages of grief, and I think part of compassion is being aware that everybody else is doing that same thing, mm-hmm. and so that it's good to talk about it with others, because you are in a community.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to know that you're not alone, which is, one of the reasons why some people find comfort going to vigils, some people find comfort going to ceremonies like spirit babies for pregnancy loss, because it's helpful for people to know that they're not alone.
Do you think Kuan Yin partly embodies that kind of like, I'm here to comfort you, like I'm here for you kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely. I think one of the biggest things I see from her as the deity that I've mostly talked to is that she's definitely comforting. But how do I say it? I think maybe we've already touched on it, that she's comforting, but she also wants to make sure that she's comforting, she's protecting, but she also wants to make sure that you stand up for yourself. And I don't think that that's necessarily a written thing that I see about her, but that's how I feel.
Well, I think that's kind of like people don't see the complexity of deity, and I think people kind of dismiss the idea that a deity can be just as complex as human personas. And so there are people that will think of Kuan Yin as fluffy bunny and blah blah blah, that kind of thing. But I don't know, every deity, including her, because I've encountered her through you when we've done magical workings, and there's more to a deity than just what has been written about them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it's something that you don't necessarily experience unless you do magic. Unless you do ritual and you spend time with that deity. It's true. Yeah. And it's hard to explain. Like we've said before about Circle of Caradwen being open source, we have all the rituals online and people can look at them. And when I first read the first degree or the second degree, I forget which one it was, ritual, so I read it because I was being initiated and I knew backwards and forwards what the word said, and because I was nervous about it. And then, but at a certain point, when you're doing the ritual, when you're actually physically embodied in the ritual, it's completely different than those words on paper.
Right.
And it's hard to describe how that's different. You just have to be there.
Yeah. Well, because there's even a word difference sometimes, because it depends on who your initiator is and how things go. And we always, sometimes there's silly screw ups in the ritual, like, oh yeah, I forgot that part. But definitely the spiritual difference is huge. Like, you can read something and it'll move you spiritually, but to embody something is a completely different thing.
Right. Exactly.
Speaking of that, you've been going to what I know you like to call Chinese Hogwarts the last few months. And it kind of started with an exploration of the magical side, starting in the coven, with the magical side of acupuncture. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So a couple of years ago in Circle of Caradwen, I decided to introduce y'all to Chinese medicine through rituals. I did one ritual per season around each element. And in Chinese medicine, there are 5 elements, 5 seasons, and you can read about these on star.org on my Through the Dragon Door column, which I have written about each of the elements and in more detail. But I wanted to explore that because it's something that we didn't get in acupuncture school. And doing acupuncture points in ritual to see how people reacted, what people felt, how it would be different than just getting acupuncture in my treatment room when I work. And it led me to a deeper reading of a book called Five Spirits by Laura Eve Deshar, and I'm now studying with her and Benjamin Fox, mostly in New York over the course of this year, to learn. And I'm learning that it is part of the acupuncture tradition. It's just not stuff that we necessarily learn in school, especially when you're studying for board exams. You're getting a lot of information, but you can't possibly study everything you need to know about every acupuncture point. In California, we have to learn the locations of the points, what they do, how deep you're supposed to needle them, what angle you're supposed to needle them. We don't spend a lot of time learning the actual name of the acupuncture point other than the American version, which is large intestine 4, but we don't learn what the names of the points are and what their significance are. And studying with Lori, reading her book, and I'm learning more of the spiritual aspect, not necessarily just magical, but she calls her style of doing acupuncture alchemical. And so we're learning, we're sort of combining mystery and magic and spirituality and archetypes and dream work and all of this, and it's to figure out how we want to take this back to our treatment rooms and use it. And it's very profound. And as part of that work, they're asking us, Lori and Benjamin are asking us to do a lot of inner work on ourselves to learn how to transform our own lead into gold. So there's a lot of transformation going on in that class. And not necessarily during those weekends, just during those weekends, but you see a lot of change in people between classes.
Well, that's always good. I think good education programs will do that in general.
Right.
But kind of like going to the health side of acupuncture, why do you think people seem to, people will either be like, oh, that's too woo-woo and that doesn't do anything, and yet some people will be like, I love acupuncture, and and like you even going to learn about acupuncture. Why do you think people are skeptical about acupuncture treatments?
First of all, because it's different. We live in a culture where you go to the doctor, they spend 10, 15 minutes with you, write your script, and you go. And sometimes you feel heard, sometimes you don't feel heard, sometimes you feel like they have just chastised you for your own decisions and your life choices. And it's not very validating in a lot of ways to people, but that's what we're used to. And I think Western medicine is great for a lot of things. I'm not completely dissing it, but I think that the healthcare system in America has a lot of failings. We're not going to go into that here. I'm going to talk about the other side and the positive things to do with acupuncture, because that was your question. Acupuncture takes time.
Right.
First thing about it is that when you go in for your first acupuncture treatment, it's going to take about an hour and a half to 2 hours, because I want to know a lot about your health history, more than just the things you checked off in the boxes on the page. I want to hear you tell me your story. I want to hear how different things affect you. And sometimes that's a lot for people to take in, that in a regular acupuncture treatment is about an hour long, and you're asking people to just let go of all the stuff they have for the rest of the day in that hour and just be, and either listen to the sounds of the street noise outside or listen to music that I play for them. But it's really challenging for a lot of people to just do nothing for half an hour.
Yeah.
I've only once had to take away homework from somebody who had sheets of paper and she was trying to read during her treatment, and I was like, this is you time. This is not studying for exam time. This is you time.
Right. It just kind of, that's funny to imagine, because I've had a few acupuncture treatments from you and from other people, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine doing that with all the needles in. Like, I'd be worried I'd like bump one and it would go where it's not supposed to.
Yeah, it's true. But some people are not concerned about that, and because they're just go, 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 and that's how they're used to their lives. So acupuncture takes time for the treatment, but it also a lot of times takes time for change to happen. Acupuncture is not an immediate quick fix a lot of times. Sometimes it'll work really, really, really well. One treatment for pain, one treatment for this, boom, it's gone. And that's really awesome. One treatment for labor preparation, the next day, sorry, I can't come in because my water broke. That's awesome. We like those kind of quick changes.
Right.
But profound changes take time. And that's also something that people are not used to. They think, oh, I went to acupuncture once, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, and it really takes, you have to give it at least a couple of months to see changes in your life a lot of times. And that's not something that everybody is used to doing.
Right. Because there's a lot of there's a good deal of, at least especially around pain management, there's a lot of the medicines out there that will just work and you will feel no pain depending on what medication it is. But, even I learned that as well with acupuncture. It's like it's not necessarily going to eradicate your pain like those drugs will. But I think over time it will make things more manageable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're concerned with treating pain, since this is the example right now. We're concerned with treating pain, but we're also concerned with supporting the underlying issues that cause pain to begin with.
Right.
And we want to work on fixing those issues, which will then help ease the pain as well. So whenever you're getting acupuncture or Chinese herbs, they're usually focused on both. Right. Not the immediate situation, but also what's going on underneath it. How'd you get that way in the first place, Because usually chronic pain builds up over time too. Mm-hmm. So when people have chronic pain for a long time, they come for acupuncture and it doesn't work once, but well, how long have you had the pain to begin with? You have to consider that.
Right.
So,
do you think Western medicine's catching up with the whole body, spirit, mind idea that, how other things in your life can affect how your body reacts to certain things? Yeah,
I think they are. I think even if they don't understand it, they're referring to me, people like me, they're referring to acupuncturists. I treat veterans who get referred by their pain doctors at the Veterans Administration, and their doctors don't get it really. But they're like, here, acupuncture worked for another patient, so here I'm referring you to this acupuncturist. And healthcare organizations, some different healthcare organizations have Qigong classes or Tai Chi classes that they offer because they see that it's working. They might not understand how it works, why it works, but they see the results in their patients, and they'll be more likely to refer their patients to alternative treatments. So I think slowly but surely, I think it's even different now than when I started acupuncture school. Um, well, I guess that was about 14 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now you even see, there's even acupuncturists being hired by the healthcare systems themselves
hmm
these days, and so that they have their
Yeah,
own on staff.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes they're just they're there to work on pain conditions mostly, because that's the overwhelming idea that acupuncture treats pain. Well, I'm here to tell you it treats lots of other things. I may have
Hmm.
gotten into acupuncture because it helped with my pain condition, but it's useful for so many different conditions.
Hmm.
I do tell people, when people ask me, the elevator pitch about what you do in like 20 seconds, right?
Right.
What does acupuncture treat? Is it just for pain? And I say no, it's not just for pain. Acupuncture treats lots of things. I will say that if you break a bone or if you've had an accident, go to the hospital.
Hmm.
Like emergency situations, I would say go get those treated and then come see your acupuncturist afterwards, because we can help with recovery faster. I also
Hmm.
treat people who've been in car accidents, referred to me by their chiropractors. People always think car accidents, go see a chiropractor. And I have chiropractors who refer their patients to me because they know that acupuncture can deal with more than just the physical pain. We can help deal with the emotional trauma as
Hmm.
well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know that it's not just for pain because, after being, talking to you for many years now, and and I also know that your specialty is actually gynecology.
Yes, it is. And that's partially because of how acupuncture changed my life. I wanted to give something back. I wanted to
Hmm.
focus on women's health. Now I don't just call it women's health, though. I call it menstrual health, because there are people who menstruate who don't consider themselves women.
Hmm.
So I want to try to be more inclusive and be open to treating trans people as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
Actually.
so I think the only way to describe that is menstrual health, really. Um, and I applaud certain companies that make products for menstruation that are now actually actively focusing on trans men as well, because they may need special underwear at different times of the month as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen those. Those are some of those things. That's very awesome to see. Although I'm really, really impressed with our society in general in some ways, because it seems like, how we were talking about the Orlando shooting, and you know and just how there's been a lot of support for the LGBT community,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see it in a lot of little things. I mean, you're kind of seeing it through the Pulse shootings in a bigger way, because there's a lot of people, really, allies especially, that are like, hey, this was a homophobic hate crime.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also seeing a lot around transgender issues too in the last few years, where people are really recognizing that gender fluidity exists, and that it's not good to be crappy to people because of their gender identity. Wow,
Right.
what a concept, right?
Yeah.
um so it's really good to see, and I've been seeing it in a lot of spiritual circles and some medical circles, where there's a lot of the companies, insurance companies and stuff, who are now offering transgender care and being really good about it, or at least attempting to be good about it. They don't always get it perfect, but like I know for sure, for like the Kaiser system is trying to be really good about it, and they don't always get 100%, but they're working on it. And I think I think that has been pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's definitely changing. And oh, sorry, my cat wants to be part of the interview.
That's okay. It's happened before.
I consulted with my one of my exes and my trans friends when I was putting up my paperwork for my intake forms, because I wanted to make sure that I was as inclusive as possible. Mm-hmm. Because so many, it's like we said, it's changing, but so many things have male and female. And right. That's it. Check which one of these boxes you are, but you're not necessarily including everybody when you do that. You're not including everybody when you do that. Yeah. So I'm glad to see that there are some changes, and I think with the bathroom bill, just shorthand, you are seeing people coming forth saying that they don't really care what gender you are to use their bathroom. There are people who are coming out in support of trans people who you might not have thought of before because of this issue.
Well, it's been nice to see really big companies come out and be like, we're not going to do business in a state that has this bill because we're not going to put our employees through that.
Yeah.
It's been good to see that support, and it's been really good to see more and more people in general, especially in the US, being supportive of LGBT and that being more of the norm than not.
Right. Yeah. I feel envious of the younger generation because they're growing up in an era where it's not a big deal when their friends come out to them as queer. Mm-hmm. For me, it's still, coming out as whatever, coming out as somebody who's a survivor of sexual assault, coming out as a person who's had an abortion, they're like, it's always a huge, like, I'm stepping up to the precipice and I might fall off. For me, that's the kind of environment I grew up in. Like, you didn't know who was going to have your back.
Right.
Right. But kids these days, they're growing up in a place where it's totally cool, where, their classmates may be transitioning. They may be questioning their gender identity, and it's okay. And it's really marvelous to see. And I just hope that continues in a positive trend.
I hope so too. Although, I hope that we also don't get a double down of hatred because of, copycats and all that either. So it's kind of we're in a really weird time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think remembering Kuan Yin's message of compassion is really important during this kind of a transition time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, compassion can be easy. Going back to, compassion is complex. Sometimes it's easy. Just a really easy way to put it is don't be a dick, right?
Right. Thank you, Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton said it right there in a very simplified way. Don't be a dick. Be excellent to each other, like Bill and Ted said, right?
Right.
That's compassion. And compassion can be small things you do every day, like thanking your bus driver.
Yeah.
Tipping well, if you have the means, because little things like that may change the day of the person. Maybe the bus driver just had somebody yelling at them at the last stop, and you get on, you say, hi, how are you doing? You get off the bus and say, have a nice day. Compassion, I think, accumulates, it builds up, and those little things can help to balance or cancel out the shitty things that happen during the course of somebody's day. little acts of kindness every day, and sometimes people are too rushed to think about these things, but if we talk about them, maybe people can incorporate them into their lives a little bit.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are now out of time.
Well, that went by fast.
I know, right? We could chat about this stuff forever, though. So if people would like to get in touch with you, talk to you about any of the things that we discussed in the show, what is the best way to reach you?
I guess there are a couple of ways. Through star.org. That's probably the simplest way to do it, right? Because easiest thing to remember.
Yeah, st4r.org.
I also can be reached via my acupuncture website, which you can put in the show notes because my last name is really hard to spell.
Right.
CicutoAcupuncture.com. In hindsight, I wish I had shortened that a bit. And my email address, if people want to email me, I guess the best thing to do is just through the podcast, right?
Yeah, you can email me through the podcast or through star.org. That usually goes to me too. So,
or through the acupuncture website. Like again, my acupuncture, the address is easier to find on my website, which will be in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. So, thank you so much for being on again.
Thank you so much for having me back, Gina. Take care.
I'd like to thank Denise for joining us on This Week in Heresy. You can subscribe to This Week in Heresy via TuneIn, iTunes, Stitcher, or the app of your choice. You can also financially support this podcast through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave me a message through Twitter at TWIH Podcast or on thisweekinheresy.com.